Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm Costain. Solar PV is a crucially important low-carbon energy technology that's accessible and affordable for homeowners and businesses alike. I spoke to Nick Spicer, the chief executive of energy company Your Eco, and I asked him to explain how solar PV installations can benefit farm businesses.
Well, I think there's a huge amount of ways there, Ken. I think energy is fundamentally entwined at the heart of all we do, and there's an energy requirement across all manner of farming businesses. And I think our focus and what I'm very passionate about is trying to make sure that, in the same way we're wanting to focus on growing food locally and having a sort of local ecosystem, if you like, I want to sort of enable that organically generated clean energy at source mentality.
Where do you tend to locate your solar panels?
We fundamentally deliver on rooftops. I'm a firm believer that actually, there's a huge latent opportunity on rooftops, car parks, as we've seen, with great success over in the continent in France, and really utilizing these currently latent assets and fulfilling their potential to provide generation on site for self-consumption. I'm not going to say sort of anti the solar farm approach and utility scale. I think everything has a role, but I am a firm believer that we should be utilizing those latent assets first and then trying to fulfill that capacity we want to.
So really you see an empty roof as a wasted roof?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair way of putting it. I mean, I think we've installed on less than 5% of rooftops in this country. If you're driving wherever you're driving, you look at out of town retail parks, industrial sites. Very few of them have deployed a meaningful amount of solar. And I think a lot of that is because actually probably the nature of ownership of these buildings from a landlord perspective. And actually, what's the incentive for a landlord to deploy this additional capital to deliver renewables over their rooftops? Whereas actually, if you're a business owner or operator, run a farm or a small commercial building, whatever it might be, you've probably got much more incentive from actually the saving and the investment, quite a compelling return on investment that underwrites that business case.
Do you think there's also a place for field-based solar arrays?
Yeah, I think there is. I think my view would be, firstly, let's do the rooftops, the easy wins, the big roofs, the carports, and make those an impact. It's a discussion I've been engaged in with many people about this. I think, when they are done correctly, let's look at disused landfills, quarry sites, areas of land that perhaps are non-productive and can be used to good effect, then, actually there's a case there. I also think, there's agrivoltaics and different examples of how solar panels can be used much more effectively on this sort of utility scale. Where I think we're perhaps missing a trick or being a bit more brazen is by bulldozing through red tape, so to speak, and just filling large acreages with utility scale solar without necessarily think about if it's in the right place or could it be done more effectively elsewhere. And actually solar farms, we talk about only taking up 0.3% of available land in the UK, but actually that when we talk about marginal gains and what else, or someone might say, but look how much a golf course takes up. I think the reality is that 0.3% could still be used for something else. And I think it's a hard one because I also think, we've only got to look at where we are recently from the news for landowners and farmers and the challenges they're under. And I live in a rural environment, always have. And so, socialize and friends are within that and work on the farms locally and support those. Actually, you understand why landowners and farmers are enabling this to be deployed on their land. But actually, that raises in so many ways a greater issue for me of why are we not focusing on actually the root cause of why farmers are having to turn to this, or landowners. We then look at tenant farms and everything else in between. So far-reaching conversations that need to be had.
What tends to happen to the energy generated by your solar installations?
Yeah, the majority of it is all sized for self-consumption purposes. And I would say from a well-sized solar array, probably arguably 60 to 70% of that solar is consumed on site. And that's often to do with the irradiance conditions, and the time of use and the profile of how that demand's being used. And that might equate to, I would say, in a well-sized system, to about 30%-ish of that site's overall consumption coming from on-site renewables. Arguably, you'd want to push that and go further. I think there's several challenges to that. I think battery cost is currently prohibitive and costly. I think also it's hard to capture a latent abundance of solar generated in the higher irradiating 6 months of the year and take them to the shoulder seasons. And I also think actually that we don't have strong export rates or comfort around exporting really at that sort of smaller scale. And I think a lot of the utility firms are moving away from giving comfort and stability, as they look to deliver their own projects. And I think, therefore, the self-consumption model is the one that's most effective and gives quite a compelling return for farmers and agricultural businesses. I mean, if you look at the poultry sector, the energy demand is significant, so it contributes a large balance towards energy security, as it does maybe in the case of robotic milking or whatever else you might be running as part of that farm or support services to it.
For those farms that are consuming the majority of their energy on site, how long, just on average, would it take for them to pay off their investment?
I would say 4 to 6 years. So you would probably see a system repay itself in 4 to 6 years. And I would say your annualized return, so that ROI could be between 20 and 40% dependent. And these systems now have a lifespan that can be warranted 25 out to 30 years. So quite a compelling asset to invest in, and why there's so much institutional lending available to take advantage. And I also think the cost of renewables has come down significantly, and you can see the cost of solar now on a rooftop from sort of £600 a kilowatt at scale, maybe, through to about £1,000 a kilowatt. But it's certainly come down from when we looked at previous, only a decade ago, and feed-in tariffs where prices were 3-4 times greater than this. And actually, the market now stands on its own 2 feet without subsidies, which is why I think it's become a compelling investment for so many.
As you say, prices are coming down substantially, but a whole installation can still be pretty expensive. What sort of funding arrangements do you tend to offer to farms and to other landowners?
Yeah, it's across the board. And, some who have the ability to self-fund will, which is probably always the most advantageous approach. We see a lot of asset finance, where those can be on very favorable terms. So you can maybe go out to 7 years. Sometimes you can even go beyond. It might be 90% loan to value. Some will even do 100%. And I think the farming community is very comfortable with asset finance, as it has been from, its equipment, be that on HP or how it's procuring its equipment and all its resources that it's utilizing around its farm and its asset base. So I think it's very familiar to, in effect, put that on the tab. I think there's also the approach for power purchase agreements, where someone, in effect, will install your system for free and you can buy low-cost electricity from them. I think that approach certainly has a place, I think, but, if it can be funded, then that's certainly the most advantageous. But also the PPA fund can work because it's off balance sheet and provides energy security for a longer term. But, often you see that's most advantageous when looking at things at a larger scale, might be from a supermarket or chain of landlords, let's say, who are looking at it in that approach, where actually there's much greater benefit to them across an asset portfolio.
And just finally, Nick, your Eco recently sponsored Land Alive, the Southwest Regenerative Farming Conference at the Bath and West Showground. Why was it that event in particular was important to you?
Well, I think we've always had a really strong relationship with Bath and West, and I think actually the foundation of Bath and West and what it was set up to do in its very infancy in 1777, am I right in thinking, around then, in talking about how we improve agricultural practices, and actually taking that knowledge and transitioning it and providing education. I think in some ways it's now more important than ever. And I think what Land Alive is helping to do is try and share that vision of where we all want to go, looking at soil, looking at the ecosystem, and what it means and translate to regenerative farming and all the wonderful things people are seeking to achieve. And for me, that's where I see energy as part of that mix, because in the same way, people might be talking organic, local, and all these terms, actually we're saying the same with energy. Grow your own energy at source, and use it on site. And actually that self-consumption model, combined with how we want to look at the principles of what Land Alive's setting out to achieve, seem to, for me, to be a great harmonization, and vision of what we're wanting to achieve.
That was Nick Spicer from Your Eco. More news as ever on our website, 8point9.com. That's all for now. We're back soon. Thanks for watching.